Hello, I'm Anita McVeigh, and this is the Iran War Today, our daily briefing, bringing you up to date with all you need to know on day 62 of the US-Israel war with Iran. And let's start with some of today's key developments. Oil prices rise to their highest since the US-Israel war on Iran began. It follows reports the US military is planning a new wave of attacks on Iran to break the deadlock in negotiations with Tehran. US media reports that America is pushing for a new international coalition to restart commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, a new message issued in the name of Iran's supreme leader brings up the idea of a new management of the Strait of Hormuz. And let's begin with oil prices jumping to their highest level since 2022 after a report that the US military is set to brief President Trump on new plans for potential action in the Iran war. Brent crude rose by almost 7% to more than $126 a barrel at one point. That's the highest since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It fell back slightly in later trading, but the trend for the week remains strongly upward. The potential impact is wider than just petrol and diesel prices. The UK government has warned people could face higher energy, food and flight ticket prices as a result of the war. And let's get more on this with our business correspondent, Ben King. So, Ben, let's start with where the price of a barrel of oil is at right now after that high.
Well, the last time I checked, it was about $114 a barrel for the benchmark Brent crude oil price. It's been a day of extraordinary volatility, and some of that exaggerated by some quite technical factors to do with it being the end of the month. But nonetheless, it shows how dramatically the market responds to any kind of movement in the negotiations about how to resolve the conflict in Hormuz. And a lot of analysts say that actually still the oil price doesn't fully price in the prospect of a long protracted closure to that strait, and would, in that scenario, have the potential to go even higher.
And Ben, we heard the Governor of the Bank of England speaking today of an energy price shock and warned that lower income households will suffer the most. So what sort of scenarios are being looked at by the bank in terms of any action by them?
Yeah, so today was the day the Bank of England announced its decision on interest rates. They kept them on hold, but in their new way of presenting information, they outlined scenarios, and there were two scenarios that saw a relatively swift resolution of the situation in the Gulf and energy prices coming back down. And in those situations, they wouldn't necessarily have to put up oil prices, but they also underlined a third scenario, which saw oil prices staying above $100 a barrel through to the end of next year. And that would see inflation in the UK above 6%, and they would have to put up interest rates above 5% to deal with that. And the bank also talked about the impact not just on oil, but also on food. They say that in the last oil shock in 2022, they were surprised by how much energy prices fed through into the cost of food, not only energy being an important component of the price of processed food, obviously you have to cook it and package it and transport it, but also fertilizers. Lots of our fertilizers come from the Gulf. Those will be less available, they'll be less available around the world, and that could lead to higher food prices. And that's something that affects the poorest households the most.
OK, Ben, thank you very much. Ben King. Well, as we mentioned, today's spike in oil prices was largely blamed on concerns that the Iran war could worsen and lead to a protracted Middle East supply disruption. The US outlet Axios reported that Donald Trump was set to receive a briefing today on plans for a series of military strikes on Iran. The idea being that the US hopes it would make Tehran more flexible on the nuclear issue. Well, let's go live to Washington and our correspondent Shaima Khalil. And Shaima, hello to you. Obviously, there are lots of elements to any discussions that are going on between the US and Iran, or hopes of discussions going on, including the nuclear issue, but others, and not least the Strait of Hormuz and what happens there. What are you hearing in Washington about any further potential military action by the US?
Well, we're hearing that reporting from Axios about CENTCOM either briefing or having briefed President Trump on military options against Iran. Now, if confirmed, and I must say we did reach out to CENTCOM and they haven't confirmed that, but if confirmed, it means that the Trump administration is considering restarting military combat operations in Iran. Because remember that we've been in a holding pattern of a ceasefire for some time now. We don't know how long it's going to last, but essentially there's a ceasefire. The conflict itself continues because the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports is still in place. It's been in place from April 13th, so over 2 weeks now. And it has been quite affecting and suffocating the economy. It has been quite effective in making it hard for the Iranian people inside Iran. What it hasn't done is that it hasn't brought Iran to the negotiating table yet. What are the options in front of President Trump with these unconfirmed report? Well, the reporting is that they're either looking at a wave of big strikes or aimed at infrastructure. That's one option. Or he's also looking at, or would be looking at, taking over part of the Strait of Hormuz to ease commercial shipping. The thing about that is that would require boots on the ground. So that's a big issue right there. But also remember that we don't know if shipping companies would be confident enough in that option. But what it signals to you is that the Trump administration might be getting impatient with Iran, essentially not caving. But it doesn't take into account the Iranian reaction. How would Iran react to renewed military options? What we've seen in the past is that with any military option, with any military operation, with any strike, Iran struck back into its neighbors. So are we going to see that again? But remember that all of this is happening while Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is being grilled in Congress. This is the second day now. And I must say, it's been split along political lines and along party lines in how this has been received, being asked about the effectiveness of the operation, the length of the operation, and crucially, the cost of the operation. $25 billion is a rough estimate so far, with all of these economic ramifications, not least the price of oil, reaching as high as it is right now.
Okay, Shaima, thank you very much for that. Shaima Khalil in Washington. Well, Iran's supreme leader has declared that the United States had suffered a shameful defeat, rejecting a warning from Donald Trump that the U.S. naval blockade could be enforced for months to come. A statement attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei, read on Iranian television, said Tehran would secure the Gulf region, adding that new management of the Strait of Hormuz would bring economic benefits to all nations in the region. Well, with me here in the studio is BBC Persian correspondent Parham Gobadi. Parham, good to see you. Tell us first of all about the tone of this message said to be from the Supreme Leader, because of course we still haven't seen him, have we?
No, that's very correct. So again, it's a written statement, and it's really important to understand that there is still no video and no audio of him, and that fuels the speculation about his health condition and whether he is really at the helm of the matters and is effectively running the country. Regardless, his message was a message of defiance. So he still again said that, mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. He said that's a strategic asset for Iranians. He said, as you mentioned, he said that U.S. has suffered a humiliating and shameful defeat. And he has also mentioned that this is a new chapter for the country. Like his late father, who was killed in the first day of the war, he again said that he called for American expulsion from the region, because that was his father's dream, to expel American from the Middle East and from the region. And he also said that the destiny of the neighboring countries, Iran and its neighboring countries, is in our own hands, and it should not be determined by forces that come from thousands of kilometers away, which probably Arab countries have a hard time to believe after Iran attacked all these countries with ballistic missiles and drone attacks. And he also said that the primary source of all these tensions in the region, he put the blame on the Americans.
And what do we know about this new legal framework and management of the Strait of Hormuz, as mentioned in the statement? What could that mean exactly?
So at the end, he said that, as you mentioned, he said that there's going to be a legal framework. previously, Iranian authorities have mentioned that they want to impose some tolls or taxes on the ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz. We have to understand that Iran, for decades, nuclear program for Iranians was a leverage. However, during this war, they've realized that the Strait of Hormuz is a much better leverage because it's a leverage that can be monetized. For a country that has been under sanctions for decades, for a country that has been economically hit because of the war, because of this recent war, they've realized that this is a great economic opportunity. So Strait of Hormuz at the moment has become this war of endurance. For Trump, the soaring oil prices and the fuel prices in the United States, for a president who is known for being impatient, enduring this is quite difficult. On the other hand, for Iranians, Strait of Hormuz, the USA has put a blockade, naval blockade on Iran, and it's really, it's still unknown whether Iran can manage to store its oil that is extracting from the underground, and how long they can endure that, and how long they can keep it, because it can sustain irreparable damage to their oil fields and their pipelines.
And just time to ask you, Parham, about the reaction from the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, to this news from the US that they are looking at plans to carry out more strikes potentially.
Yeah. So Revolutionary Guards have said once and again and repeatedly that they have other options. And their other option, one of the things that they kept mentioning, several Iranian authorities, is that through Houthis in Yemen, they're going to block Bab el-Mandab, which is another strait in the Red Sea, and that is going to be consequential. Plus, Iranians have said that through also Houthis and themselves, they can attack oil fields, refineries in the region in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and other countries, and that can become a war of attrition, which is very different from now.
Okay, Parham Gobadi from BBC Persian, thank you very much. And whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or TV, thank you very much for your time, and we will be back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.